I think Wendy should just keep going. So, yeah, what a privilege to be here. And if you see me take my glasses on and off a lot, it's because I'm just getting used to them, which is kind of a trick for an artist to paint or draw. You take them on and off and get headaches a little bit. But anyways, it's a privilege to be here. And everyone is so friendly and welcoming. Thank you for that. Your first thought is, well, I'm a speaker at Friends of Western Art. Is anybody going to show up? So first of all, thank you for showing up. But a couple of things here. I want to say thank you to Beth. I think Beth kind of corralled me and last year and kind of told me that this might be coming. And so I want to say thank you for giving me the opportunity to get my story told. I don't know that I don't do podcasts or anything like that, so I don't know that anyone knows my story. So this is a privilege to be able to do this. And she's not here tonight, but Sarah Garr is a member of the FWA, and she's the one who introduced my wife and I. So if she watches this, thank you, Sarah. And also a couple more people before I get started here. I just wanted to say a special thank you to Hugh. He's such a great advocate for Friends of Western Art. He made this fairly easy for me, so thank you for that, Hugh. And I didn't see her, but Alicia, she helps me get my paintings submitted because sometimes it's a little confusing. But anyway, so I appreciate that. And then my wife, Kathy, is here tonight, and she's my biggest fan. She's a mother. We have two, I would say teenagers, but one just turned 20, so still at home. But yeah. So anyways, thank you, babe. So anyways, I'm very new to the art world, and I've always appreciated art, whether it be bronzes or paintings or drawings. I've always had an appreciation for it, but this side of it, didn't really know anything about it. Most of you probably know more than I do about it. But this is just kind of, sorry, Hugh, I dropped this. This is just kind of my story, the path that I took to be able to stand in front of you tonight. And I feel like it's one thing to see an artist's art, but it's also quite another to know a little bit about them. And I know the paintings that we have at home, it's nice to know who the artist is. So anyways, where did this person come from? Maybe if you saw, hey, this is going to be the first speaker. Who is this guy? There's not a lot about me out there. And in today's market with social media, it's a lot easier to get known a lot quicker. And so anyways, this is just a little bit about my journey. So Sarah introduced us to Friends of Western Art. My wife and I came the very first time here and met Fred and Deborah Fellows. And I have to say I was absolutely amazed that we had the opportunity to hear them and then to be able to speak to Deborah afterwards and Fred. I mean, what a privilege that what you all have put together allows things like that to happen for someone like me. And so it's something I'll cherish forever. But so let's just get started on the journey. So before we get started here, I want to just kind of tell a story about how, or kind of paint an image, if you will, about how a life can transform. A story about not being very afraid of change. And it's kind of a mantra that I live by today anyways, and that is that if you follow your passions and you stay pliable, you'll probably end up where you were likely supposed to be all along. Now what I mean by that is I'm a country boy from Oklahoma. That's where I was born. And I was raised in a blue-collar family in northeastern Oklahoma. And where I was from, you were kind of expected to follow in your parents' footsteps. And nothing wrong with that at all. But where I was from, I guess what I'm probably most proud of is my upbringing. My parents they instilled certainly the value of hard work. Now I know a lot of you have the same story, But my dad worked for American Airlines, and in Northeast Oklahoma, if you knew where I was from, that was the greatest job you could ever get, is to work for American Airlines. Security, my cousin works there, my uncle works there, my dad worked there. Everybody in my family worked there if they could get on there. So I became an airline mechanic. I spent 6 years as an airline mechanic, and 9/11, we all know what took place. American Airlines was one of the jets that went into the towers, and there was some underlying tensions for the way that they were operating, and I chose to quit. Now, let me just move this forward to you. I don't know if this is right here working. So, yeah, so I chose to quit at American Airlines, and trust me, it wasn't supported by anybody, and except for this lady sitting on the front right here. And that's important because at the time I was developing property and building homes on the side while I was working there, but it seems maybe in the art world it may seem unimportant to someone hearing it from the outside that I chose to quit a great job like that, but what it did was it showed I had a willingness to change direction and not be a little bit afraid of the leap. And perhaps this can, just in hearing my story a little bit, perhaps if there's someone here that is kind of fighting the same thing, it might give you a little bit of encouragement. But this laid the groundwork that would later give me the courage to do what I'm doing today. So let's talk a little bit about, you see Western art, you heard Wendy talk about the subject matter that I choose to do. Well, whenever I was younger, I didn't watch a whole lot of TV, but I spent a lot of time behind Western novels. And my very favorite author was Louis L'Amour, still is today. I've read everything he's ever put out probably 4 or 5 times. I still read him today. And his novels were unique because they never had too much killing. There was never, when he painted with his words, there was never the West wasn't dirty. We know it was, but in his novels, it never was. And what I mean is, from even the life, he just painted it, I like to use the word like fanciful, like it was a fanciful West. And so, anyways, I spent a lot of time about reading his novels, but everything he wrote was about the West, like specifically the Four Corners area, which I lived in Oklahoma. You got to remember that, right? So I didn't know. I just dreamed of coming out here. It was like I wanted to see. And in the front of his books, he would put like a map in most of the front of his books. And I would study the map because when he would talk about like Hanging Woman Creek or something like that, he'd put a map and you come over this canyon, and he always tried to be pretty accurate in what he was depicting. It made the story more interesting to me. So anyways, he was painting these with his words into my mind, and also his books also had the way I was raised, a lot of integrity, toughness, grit, always doing the right thing. Well, I believe his storytelling laid the foundation for how I would later see the West. So as a young man, I didn't own livestock. My grandfather was a rancher, but even though I was in the Midwest and I was surrounded by horses and cattle and everything else, I never owned any. But I was an outdoorsman. I still am today. I spend probably way more time than most hunting and hiking and all over the country. But I believe one fueled another. So the more I read the books, the greater desire I had to see the West. The more I was outside, the more I wanted to read the books. And it might seem insignificant again, but all I want to do today is paint the West. I won't paint any other subject matter, and doubt I ever will. My style may change over the future, but I love what I paint, and most of the time when I'm doing this, I have some sort of audio book going, William Johnstone or something to kind of set the tone. But anyway, so over 20 trips we made, I think, to the mountains of Colorado, Southwest New Mexico, Arizona, and mainly as a hunter and an outdoorsman. And at age 30, around age 30, I believe, my wife and I moved to Tucson. And so when I moved to Tucson, we were already in the property development and home building, and I decided that I would just continue that path. So this is where the art comes into play. So I have a bit of an obsessive mindset, and whether I'm building a home or developing property, I have a blacksmith shop I do some work in. It's the details. It's always the details. That's all that matters to me, is how detailed you can be in whatever you're doing. So I believe that a home should have, when I was building homes, I believe that a home should have, no matter where you looked, the home should have something unique to look at. And that didn't mean art that you purchased to put on the wall. That meant the home itself. And looking back at that today, I can say that I was always trying to do what art does. But I wanted the structure itself to have that artistic feel. So let me see if I can move forward here. So I had some early art experience at the time, and that was that every home that I designed, that I wanted to build, I'd sketch it first. And I mean, it's fairly elementary, I guess you would say, but before I started bringing it up into the air, I wanted to see what it would look like on paper. So I learned to work my way around a pencil a little bit, and of course at the time I had never yet picked up a brush, but when I would go to build a home, what the columns look like, what the front door looked like, what the roof looked like, all that you pay an architect or a designer today to do, I was doing myself. And this philosophy served me very well, because over the next few years, this is a home I built in Tucson. And I mean, it's unique for Tucson for sure, but everything about that home had to have something special, whether I was laying shotgun shells into the floor, or arrowheads into the floor, or railroad track spike, whatever, my wife knows. But this particular one had a shotgun front door handle, right? But it also had the ranch brand on the buttstock of it in rawhide. And then you'll see to the side of it there's a doorbell that is a 45 long Colt. And it had to be in the firing order of a 45 long Colt, but you could actually push it. When you pushed it, there was all kinds of different sounds that was made. So this was my art, though. And so, like the fountain there to the right, I imported from France for a home that we built here. This particular home here had a mainline railroad track staircase, which was a little difficult to build, but it was interesting. And then the railing on the outside, we just, lengthened railroad spikes, made railing so it all fit together. And this was just, here's a home that I went on to build in Telluride, Colorado. This is the same home. You see the doors for the fireplace. I built those in my blacksmith shop. This is an entryway, which was really unique. The client didn't know what they wanted, so I put this stone on the wall that has chinking wood on the side, has barnwood on the top, let alone a beautiful painting hanging in the entrance. But this was my art, and I have built it served me very, very well. But I want to tell you how I got introduced into the actual painting world. So this home right here, this is a home owned by Peter Waltz and Kathy Davis. And Peter, if you watch this, I love you, man. He had a home here in Tucson, and it flooded. It was a beautiful home. He called me one day. I didn't know him. He called me and said, "Hey, you were recommended to fix my house for me." And so I was hired to bring the home back to the exact way that it was before the flood. And what was interesting about this is this home had a studio in it, and it belonged to Kathy Davis. I'll show you a couple of pictures of the house here. I wish, Hugh, I should have had you blow the second one up because there's a Dennis Zeminski painting in there. But Kathy Davis, I didn't realize it at the time, but she was the #1 designer for American greeting cards. And this is her. And so if you've ever been into any store buying a greeting card via Hallmark or anywhere, you have seen Kathy Davis's work. And she's an abstract artist. She's absolutely phenomenal. But she was a very meticulous designer. And getting her home back to the expectations was almost an impossible task. I mean, it was pretty much an exercise in exactness for sure. But after the project was over, this built a trust and a friendship with Peter and Kathy. And, you know, I never saw the mentorship that she would give me at the time. But we'll talk a little bit more about that here in the future. I'm going to jump back over here to this other part. So, anyways, at the time, let's just bump to this next. This seems like an odd image right here, but I was really in a lot of reclaimed products. So I used a lot of barnwood. I used a lot of products from Montana. And this is a friend of mine. His name is JL. And I would purchase products from him in Montana, and you know, we both loved it. We loved the reclamation part of it. We kind of geeked out on, you know, anything that had ties to the West via metal, wood. This is a big poplar tree that I purchased from him, and he's doing some chainsaw work because what he's working on here at the base will eventually become a coffee table. And every time I would talk to JL, we would start talking about art projects. We always wanted to take the wood, turn it into some table with iron or something, because we were more interested in art than we were about the commodity of reclaimed wood products. And, you know, whenever I would start talking to him, he's very important in my life, because when I would start talking to him, his demeanor would change, his enthusiasm. You start talking about art versus the commodity of reclaimed wood, and he would get excited about it. And while it was on one of these trips in Montana Montana, Wyoming, depending on where we were, but I went into an art gallery. I always visit them, and I saw an artist painting that I could get, you know, this far from and study it. And unlike what Picasso says, you should view art from 6 foot away. It's not meant to smell, it's meant to view. But if I could get close, you know, I felt like I could almost figure out how they did it. And so I seen this painting, and when I saw it up close, I thought, you know, this is attainable. I think I could do something like this. And I'd never really thought about painting before in my life. Whereas, you know, I can look at John Soley's work up here, and I still believe that's unattainable. But the style I was looking at, I felt like I could get there. And so, anyways, move on to April, just a month later, April of 2023, actually. I text JL on April 10th, and the text went unanswered. And I got a little concerned because he wasn't married, he didn't have kids, he had a sister, and I got a call from a friend that told me they found him at a job site sitting in the seat of his truck dead. And so I'm the only one who knew his family up there, so I had to notify the family. And you know, it broke my heart. And the reason I say this is I think his passing is the catalyst that turned me to the art world. And I believe it changed my life's direction because, see, JL always wanted to do the art side of reclaimed wood and that, but he never made the transition because he was trapped in the money that the commodity side of it would bring him. He just didn't have the ability to move over. And, that's where this phrase comes right here that I put up first. You have one life in which to do everything you'll ever do, so act accordingly. And so I realized that, hey, I get to live in this body one time, and so I'd rather choose to do what I absolutely love to do than what I felt like I might be a little bit tied to. So in reflection, I look back and I think, well, hey, I loved home design. I love the art of creating the homes, but I had reached the point where I was basically only managing the jobs, and I was dealing with, let's just say I was adult babysitting, all the subs, and I just wasn't getting the satisfaction of the creative process out of it any longer. And so, I felt like there was, I wanted to create. I've always wanted to create something. I still work in the blacksmith shop. I still build things and all the time. My wife knows it's all I do. But it's like I wanted to do something that didn't have all the red tape attached to the end of it. And so back to the story of Peter and Kathy. I had just finished a big project up in Greer, Arizona. Now, I built a resort up there called Lost Resorts, and I brought in a 200-year-old barn from Bath, Maine, reconstructed it. That's it there to the left. The saw blade there to the right is from JL. That's an 8-foot tall saw blade. And so I had this little creative outlet. This was one of the last projects I did. If you look on the left, you can see the coffee table that he was cutting there at the time. And so, I had poured all of my creative energy into this project, making it happen, and I just kind of felt like the time was right to make a transition. My wife and I had Peter and Kathy over to the house for dinner, and I made a promise to Kathy. We're always talking about art. She was a greeting card designer, phenomenal, and keeping the subject about her, we were talking about art and about, her path and how she ended up where she was at. And I made a promise to her. I said, I saw a painting in Montana, and I'd like to try it. And so I said, you know what? I'm going to paint something, and I'm going to send it to you. Now, you got to understand, I'd never held a paintbrush in my hand. And so, but this goes back to kind of that Louis L'Amour. If I said it, if I said I'm going to do it, I'm probably going to do it. And it's kind of like, standing here right now. I mean, I told Beth I would do it. And, months later, here I am standing up here, and it didn't, even though I knew it was coming. It was funny this morning. I've been going back and forth with you, and my wife says, what time are you supposed to be there? And I said, I don't really know. And so we pulled it up on the computer, and it on the FWA website has like a countdown timer. And it was like 11 hours and 7 minutes, It's like, so it kind of became real that, I was going to be standing here tonight. But so I made this commitment, and I reached out to Kathy Davis for help. And it's almost comical because, I had to ask her what kind of canvas. I didn't know nothing. What size brush and what type of a brush. Even all the way, I still have her text where she was sending me paint colors like, well, I don't know, Nathan, try some yellow ochre and buy some of this. And she'd tell me what the quantities was. And, I didn't know a thing in the world. And I probably still don't know too much, so I don't want to say that. But my wife and I vacation every year in Ouray, Colorado. And so I just finished Lost Resorts. And when we vacation up there, it's usually for a little bit longer time period. And I get bored. I love the place, but 30 days there or something, I run out of something to do. So I had told her, I said, when we go, that's when I'm going to, I'm going to try. Let's try. So I sat down and I started, the first painting wasn't really a painting. It was really just like seeing how the brush worked with the paint. I don't know how else to describe it. I mean, it's like, how much do I thin it? Do I thin it? I didn't know. So then, anyways, while I was up there, I did this painting, and it seemed to work. I liked it, and I just feel like that, I've always felt this way, that if you treat something like a hobby, you get hobby results. Always, no matter what you're doing. If you treat it like it's, you're serious about it, you might be able to get something to turn out. But, I gave up in June of 2023, I gave up home building 100%. Haven't built a thing since then. And I will tell you that the art money doesn't compare. But I sure do enjoy it. So every time I do a painting, I would send it to Kathy Davis. And then I love her. She is honest. And she was trying to help me. And, she's very complimentary, but she would always give me pointers, right? And she critiqued the work for me very thoroughly. And unlike when you send it to some people and they're just like, it's beautiful, good job, which really doesn't help. But she was an abstract painter. I obviously am not. And so she was always telling me, Nate, you need to loosen up. You gotta loosen up a little bit. And I am OCD as bad as they come. And it seemed like impossible for me to do that. And so anyways, as I started painting, I might have skipped a page here. Hang on just a minute. Yeah, so I'm good. So I had, I might have, one second here. I might have to tag team somebody to come in here. No. Okay, so I think it's a good time to say that I didn't do this by myself, though. Whatever I've done, I didn't do it by myself. I had, the day, Peter and Kathy. I've had other clients that I've done work for. Specifically, I don't want to mention some of their names. I think that'd be inappropriate, but I was, let's see what this goes right here. So I had a private art show up in Saguaro Ranch. Some clients actually threw it for me. They did it for me. And so I had a lot of paintings, and I put them on display there, and it was quite a success for me. And so, I didn't do it alone. And, the support from, my wife, who supported me way back when I quit American Airlines, supported me whenever I quit building, which would be a hard thing to do. But, I wasn't an island. I didn't do this by myself. But anyways, meanwhile, all this that's taking place, I never even knew that the Mountain Oyster Club existed. And I live 4 miles down the road. But I think this is kind of a bit of a humorous story. So I didn't know the Mountain Oyster Club existed. I was getting feedback from Kathy Davis of, hey, you need to loosen up. You need to, you're kind of, as they might say in a phrase, you're kind of painting in between the lines, right? And so I decided to do an experiment. And I couldn't mentally make the leap, so I said, I'm going to force myself to do it. And so I said, I'm going to do a painting, and I'm not going to allow myself to use any brush smaller than a ½ inch. And what's interesting about that is whether or not I'm doing something that's 60 inches big or whatever, often I'll have a number one spotter trying to get the tightest of tightest lines on there. So if you tell me I can't do anything with anything smaller than a ½ inch brush, it's just going to be impossible for me. So anyways, I gave it a go. And you might remember, some of you, this one from last year. So I call this the oddball, though. It's actually called Prickly Pear Pass. But I started painting this, and I was never happy with it. And it's fairly big, so I would set it in the side of the studio, and then I'd come back to it later, and I'd set it in the side. But I was never happy because it's not in the lines. Everything's not in the lines. And so along this time, I should, for context, also say that, you know, my art was doing fairly well. I had several high-end galleries in Jackson Hole and Telluride and Fort Worth and Santa Fe, you know. So I was doing okay. Art was taking off good. But about this time, a friend of my wife's told her about the Mountain Oyster Club show. Now, this is way late in the year, and so I had never heard of it before. So I looked up online last year, well, what do you do to submit? So I looked it up, and in the rules, I might have read them wrong, but in the rules, I thought it said that you couldn't submit anything that had been in a gallery before. Well, I didn't have anything except this and one other painting, and I didn't have time to paint anything. And so I said, well, I got two. So it was that one, and it was Nighthawk, which Nighthawk is my style. That's what I do. The other one, let me go back to it here, or we can just leave it there. The other one wasn't my style. So anyways, Nighthawk sold, the other one didn't sell. And so it's kind of funny because I still have the other one. But, you know, this year's a little different. I did know about it, so this year I'm coming prepared. So I actually did paintings for the Mountain Oyster Club show. So that might explain a little bit. Also, my frames are lighter. Did you notice that? So I want to give a shout out to Dave at Montgomery Frame. I think he's the best there is. And he custom makes all these for me. He does the radius corners in my frames, and he spends a lot of time doing them one-off for me, just exactly the way I want them. And so they're not as heavy as they were. But yeah, so anyways, here, this slideshow here, these are just a few slides. Now you kind of know my journey, how I got here, what I'm doing. And 6 of 23, I started my first painting, and you know, so I'm just a little over 2 years here. But this right here was, this right here is no man's land, and a lot of these were straight acrylic that you see on here. Now everything I'm doing is oil and acrylic, and so as you look at a couple of these that I've done, my biggest inspiration in the art world today is Billy Shank. I will give him props. I think I feel like he pioneered the contemporary Western style. I don't know quite how he does what he does. I mean, he's had a lot of years doing this. I think he's phenomenal. But the style he does, kind of we're at least in the same geographical location. Let's put it that way. But I'm comfortable trying that style of work. Let's put it that way. And I feel like him stepping out of like the traditional art world kind of gave some artists the permission to do that, because this is very contemporary Western art, like this here. And so a lot of times I'm trying to tell a story on canvas some way or another, and a lot of the paintings that you see that I do are location specific. This is for a gallery in Jackson Hole, so they request that I put the Teton Mountains or something to do with that's relative to the area. Let's see what we got here. So this one's interesting. Yeah, so I also try to use double entendres in my storytelling. So you've also always heard don't bring a knife to a gunfight, but this guy brought a gun and a shotgun, but the other guy happens to have a stick of dynamite and it's lit. So I named it Outmatched, and it's just kind of a a story that I'm telling there. I think neither one wins that. This one here, she's a bit mysterious, and I named her Charmed because I felt like any cowboy in the West that saw her would have been charmed. But to give a double meaning, she's wearing a charm bracelet, and then I gave her a Dolce & Gabbana belt buckle, for a little bit of style. And this one here, my son and I went and photographed Monument Valley. And so this is an image from there, but when you're painting, this particular, the Navajo people, I feel like it's so important to get the blankets right, the stripes, the colors, the what. It's important to them. So on this particular painting, they got painted first, and if I couldn't get it right, then there's no sense in doing the rest of the painting. So this is just a kind of a fun one. I have this little series I do with moons, whether it's a lot of Native American stuff. So it could be a harvest moon, a flower moon, a strawberry moon, a wolf moon. But this was called flower moon. And so she's got a little flower on her hat, and to kind of tie it in together. Obviously, hold your horses. It's kind of telling a story. This is one for the Telluride Gallery that I show at, and so they're always asking me for, obviously you can probably tell this is going to Fort Worth, but this one over here. But this is for Telluride, so it's the street of Telluride, and I thought it was interesting. I wanted to put an American flag in there, and so I named it Right to Bear Arms, and you can probably tell why bear is not actually spelled incorrectly. It is correct for that one, and it's kind of her town. And I'm trying to learn how to work with the galleries, and this particular one loves street scenes of Telluride, so everything that I've painted them that has something to do with Telluride sells fairly quickly. Which I might answer a question before someone asks me, is like, why is everything you do so big? And it's because in the areas where I show, they generally tell me big homes have big walls, and they need to fill them. So that's what I'm trying to do. Let's see here. See, this is it's a different perspective, but if you can notice that, see, this is also the street of Telluride, but I've got the Sheraton Hotel in there, and so no fretting. I suppose you can figure out what that means. And, another Teton scene here at the Bison for Jackson Hole. But anyways, that's kind of my story, and I just want to say, I sure do appreciate you all for inviting me. And kind of, I got a little quote here from Louis L'Amour to finish this. He says, "There will come a time when you believe everything is finished, but that will be the beginning." And I do feel like my journey is just beginning. And I started doing a couple of little series like this one here. It's called Mustang Man, and that is a title to a Louis L'Amour book. That one over there is called Last of the Breed, and that's a title to a Louis L'Amour book. So it's kind of my tribute back, and so I have several paintings. There'll be a couple at the Mountain Oyster Show that is also ties into the Louis L'Amour series, but that's why I said I think I'll always paint the Western theme, but the style may change, so we'll see. But anyways, I'll take questions.